for any position, we are looking specifically for a president and directors. So please contact your nominating committee, which is Valerie, Bill, and Lori, who is not here. And the voting for the board positions will take place at the November 12th meeting that will be here. Anything else? I think I've got everything. Did I mention there's ice cream back there? Ice cream. And other desserts. Yes, some good cookies. Valerie brought some cookies, and always there's some meat at the back. Thank you for coming. I'm going to introduce, now this is Stephen Taylor. When I was vice president, I heard him speak at one of the conferences, and I felt like it was the most useful, practical advice I'd ever gotten at a conference. Tried my darndest to get him to come speak with us. It didn't work, and now 2 years later, he's here. So, Stephen Taylor.
Okay, try to make sure I speak loud enough. Thank you for having me. How many of you have great success in overwintering your bees? So a few of you kind of, how many of you are new beekeepers? So you haven't had a chance to overwinter? Okay. Well, I started keeping bees in 2014. My dad used to keep them back in the 70s and 80s. I still remember those times and liked it, but liked the smell of honey when he was doing it. But he got out of it just before all the pests and issues happened. And then I started in 2014. So it's gonna work. So this is the 6 M's. Let's see if it does that. When do I need to hit? It's going to be the 6 M's overwintering success, how to keep your bees alive. So I started off in 2014 keeping bees. I started with 2 beehives. I was new into it, didn't know how to treat, what to treat, and but I ended up getting one of those to make it through the winter. The next year in 2015, I purchased about 8 packages, spending some money, buying bees, wanting to get into it. And I grew them up to about 17 beehives going into the winter. Still didn't treat, wasn't sure about treatments. At that time, they always said, oh, just let the strong survive. That's how it was back when I first started. But I ended up losing all but 4. So I lost 76% of my bees that year. So in 2016, I went crazy again. I bought 10 more packages, and I grew my bees up to 22 real strong beehives going into the winter of 2016. And that year, I think I was at Hickory, and one of the guys did a great presentation on treatments, different kinds of treatments, when to treat, cost of treatments. And it's probably the best presentation I'd seen in terms of treatment wise. That's also when I think oxalic acid started getting good, being able to do it. So I got a vaporizer, one of the wands to go in, the Varox one. Closed up my bottom boards, and I ended up in February. They were all mid-February. They were all still strong, still alive. But I bought some winter patties. They were kind of slimy winter patties, put them on there. And within about another month and a half, I was down to 4 beehives. I lost from 22 down to 4. So I ended up losing 82% of my bees. It wasn't until the next year, 2017, I purchased more packages. Seems like all it is the bee supply companies were making a bunch of money on packages for me. I was buying all those Georgia bees. I bought 8 more packages, and I got back up to 22 in the winter going in. But that year, since I started in 2014, I was going to a lot of different bee meetings. Went to 5 different county meetings a year, or 5 different county meetings every month, and summer meetings, spring meetings, field days, trying to learn. And someone came to Moore County Club and spoke about candy boards and quilt boxes and how they overwintered 100% of their beehives. And so I ended up, that was late November or early November, so I didn't have much time to get ready for it. But I started building my own because none of the vendors at the time made candy boards and quilt boxes back in 2017. So I got all those built, put on, and that year I actually only lost 1. So I went in with 22 and came out with 21, and it was actually a nuke that I thought was actually may not even make it into the winter. So I only lost 4%. Then in 2018, that's first year I didn't have to buy bees, and I haven't had to buy bees since. And those 21 beehives that I had coming out of the winter in 2017 grew to 44 in 2018. And that year I did the same thing, and I only lost 1 again, and it was a nuke. So I was at 43. And it's continued ever since. Now I have, right now I'm up to like 120 beehives. And it takes a lot of time. If I'm not working my job, I'm working the bees. And I'm having to plan, and my dad's always coming up with something for me to do at the last minute that messes up my schedule. Y'all probably don't have anything that happens like that, but every year they continue to increase. And some of the people that I talk to that do candy boards and quilt boxes or some form of feeding and taking care of the moisture on top of the beehives, they tend to have real good success as well at overwintering theirs. One guy I talked to, the guy that actually came and spoke to our meeting, I asked him about it a couple years later, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to cut back. I'm not going to do it as much as what I did before." I think he lost some that year. So whenever you find something that works, make sure that you continue to do that. So. I don't think it likes me. Oh, there it is. It did something.
There you go. So much.
Yeah, so I already talked about some of that. So the 6 M's, overwintering success. I tried to make it to where when I first started, it was 4, and then I continued and grew it to 6 several years ago. So first one is mites. Everyone's familiar probably with mites. I call it the tick that gets on the bees, but just need to do your summer treatment. Need to have your treatment applied by July or August. I'm late on some of mine already because it's already, I have too many. And recheck is needed, and then check your brood for signs of mite issues or viruses. And then I put on there and also do your winter treatment. I do my oxalic acid. I do mine the last week, near the last week of December, which is typically around Christmas time. I have to schedule my vacations around that time to make sure I hit all of them. It's a little easier nowadays because the Varox vaporizer I used to use would take so long. Transition to one of the Pro Vape, one that is 110. The issue with it is I had trouble with, I had to use an inverter with the vehicle and it had to sit there for a long time, several hours doing it. So I've got two more that are DeWalt based 20-volt battery vaporizers. They're from Larabi's, and they do great. You can treat one of your beehives and I can do eight beehives with it in probably 5 to 10 minutes. Whereas with the Varox one, I'd have probably been there for over an hour. So the second M is the mother. Make sure you have a good quality laying queen. If you don't have one now, you're probably not going to get one because the vendors are probably running out of them. Now, I think I saw some emails this past week, maybe from Bailey Bee Supply, that they had like their last order for queens. So just need to make sure you have a good quality queen coming out going into the winter. Number 3 is minimize. I was talking to her earlier. We talked about minimize your hives. So I go in probably around end of October, November, and I see how much space they have on their hives. If I've got on some larger hives, I typically like to go in with through the year with one deep. I do 10 frames and I do nukes. So I do a 10 frame deep, 10 frame medium, or I'll do a 10 frame deep with 2 10 frame mediums. This past year, I actually, the ones that were a deep and a medium, if they were very strong, when I took the honey off, I put another deep on them because I didn't want to contaminate medium frames and want them to be able to grow. And the ones that filled it all up, I ended up leaving their deeps on them. And on several cases with those, when it got to springtime, I actually was able to, they had brood up in the top. I just threw a double screen board in between and made another colony out of them, and everyone on requeen. So got to use something I bought at one of the bee supply, or I think it was Hive Life or North American Honeybee Expo. So I got to use some of that equipment. So. But remove that extra space. One thing I found is, let's say that you got one box that has some dry comb and maybe a few frames of honey in it. You can take that box off and you may be able to use those frames of honey into another colony that may need some need that food. I also keep frames of in the freezer. I think I have maybe about 5 or 6 freezers, so I keep them filled up with frames. So you know, whenever you have food like that, it's good to be able to put it back on the bees. So number 4 on the 6 M's is, I call it munchies, but it's basically the food. Feeding your sugar water to get the bees ready for the winter. I used to feed mine, and I'll probably this year has been will probably be my first time that I've had the losses, because I probably lose 5% or less per year of bees. But this year I didn't start feeding my bees until probably a week or 2 ago. And in the past, I was feeding from April through Christmas almost. So I found some of my bees were almost starving to death. Other ones were full of honey and didn't need any help. So every beehive is different. But I also provide, so feed your bees get the stores ready for the winter, provide dry pollen. So I have pollen feeders. You'll probably see a picture of one in a few minutes. I have several of them around my larger yards. And the bees will use it if they need it. I typically find that the bees will even when they're bringing in other pollen, some of them will go to it in summer or in the spring and summer. They really hit it around the July, August time when there's nothing else out there. Then they kind of slow back on it, and then November, December, January, and 1st of February until the maples hit, they take it real heavy during that time period. I've had snow on the ground, and the bees were taking the pollen from the pollen feeders, and during that time period. But when the maples hit, it's almost like they flip a switch and they stop taking that pollen. So I go through probably I'd say about 800 pounds of pollen a year. I should say pollen substitute. So the powdered pollen. And whenever I get it, I have to store it. Squirrels and mice love it. So first thing I do when I get it is I have buckets, color-coded buckets. I put it in it and put a lid on it, so mice can't get into it. I found out the first year I bought pollen like that, I put it in my parents' basement, put 150 pounds of pollen in the basement going into the winter. And in the spring, there was 0 pounds of pollen. Mice had gone through 150 pounds of pollen in their basement. So, but in the pollen feeders, I find that squirrels like to go in there, possums. I had to put it high enough to where my horses and mules couldn't get to it because they wanted the pollen. Yeah. So, and then also the food besides the sugar water and the pollen would be your candy board or other equivalent for food, for emergency food for the winter. Number 5. So the first 4 that I mentioned, every year I got a little bit more what I was doing. I was feeding my bees. I was doing my treatments. Started doing my treatments. I really wasn't seeing differences, but the talk that the person came and did the candy boards and quilt boxes, that's what turned my success around. And that's because moisture is probably your number 1 killer of bees in the wintertime. As long as you got a good queen, no disease, food on them, moisture is what's going to kill your bees. And I've had, even before I started doing candy boards and quilt boxes, I remember one strong hive I had. I opened it up and the insides were just soaking wet going down the sides of the beehive because there was so much moisture in there. And what happens is that moisture, heat hits the top, it condenses, falls down, and you always hear about your bees being condensed together, like a ball, and it hitting the outside of them and it peels them away kind of like an onion. So eventually those bees are going to die off, and it just continues to be like taking the peelings off layers off an onion, and your bees get smaller and smaller. But with the candy board and the quilt boxes, you don't have to worry about the moisture, and your bees really are not clustered together. They are busy inside of that beehive. So my candy board, it absorbs the moisture and allows the bees to eat the candy. We'll go over how I set up the beehives in a few minutes. Also, how I make my candy boards, but we'll talk about some other food as well. Quilt boxes, I put that on top of my candy board. We'll see a picture of that in a few minutes as well. But that helps to take care of the moisture. This is an example of quilt box. So that goes on top of the candy board. You can buy quilt boxes already made, but I like to make my own. This is a medium box. You can buy shallows boxes and do it as well. The ones that I typically see in the stores, bee stores, are probably only about half this height. I think it's probably because that's what they have left over when they cut some of their boxes. So they use that to just to be able to use it as scrap lumber. But for me, I like to have more wood chips. The wood chip, the burlap in it, they typically just cut it big enough to go around the edges, and they use typically cedar chips, but I like to use pine. And then with mine, with the way that I do mine, with doing extra, I can pull mine out at any time and put it back in without having any spillage. Because sometimes you do need to take the wood chips out, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So, when you do use the wood chips, if you decide to use either the cedar or the pine, make sure you use coarse chips or flake chips, as they call it. I get mine at Tractor Supply. You don't want the fines because when you put it in there, the burlap that I use, which I've got some right here, you can see, it's got kind of holes in it. So I double it up, and that helps with it. But if you have real fine particles, it can go right through that screen because it's number 8 hardware cloth. And I used to buy these in rolls when I first got into it. They're 3 foot wide by about 25 feet long. Now I buy it on rolls that are 3 foot wide by 150 or 300 foot. I can't remember which one it is, but when I find them, I buy them. I probably got 5 or 6 rolls of it right now. So what happens is the bees, if you have a real strong hive, they actually, you wouldn't think of it, but they can actually get under there and they chew holes into your burlap. And so you have to replace it every once in a while. But this here, with the quilt box, it allows for viewing your bees. So you can, with not having to worry about the chips coming out, you can grab a hold of it and look down into your beehives, just like an observation hive. You can look and see how much food they have, they're still alive, how they're doing. I try to do mine if it's low 50s or higher. But there's a video of David Bailey that's still out there on YouTube, on candy boards and quilt boxes. And they went out when it was in the 20s and opened it up and looked inside their beehives, and the bees are all active. So if you get a chance, you may want to look at search for David Bailey on with candy boards and quilt boxes. It's a guy by the name of David Smith with his yard that they went into. The screened inner covers, I use screened inner covers on top of mine. So I end up putting that on top of here, and then putting my lid on top of it, which allows for the moisture and everything to get out. And then I use top load cover lid with ventilation. So with my nukes, I had to make sure with my suppliers, the first person I used to buy lids from, he just made them wide enough to be able to fit onto the box. If you used a screen inner cover, it was too close for ventilation. So these I actually got from either Man Lake or from Brushy Mountain when they were open. and they're wider, and I can make sure I get a good good airflow. And I read or I saw a video today that said that even Dr. Langstroth said that moisture was real bad for bees. You know, that was back a long time ago. So they knew back then the moisture was bad. And then monitoring is my last M. So monitoring your bees, when you put your food on the bees and get them ready for the winter, which I do mine starting in December. I start with my weaker colonies first, the ones that aren't taking my sugar water. I start putting my candy boards and quill boxes on them first. The ones that continue taking the sugar water, I let them keep taking it until a little later in December, and then I'll change theirs out. But once you do it, you need to continue to make sure that they have food. And the bees typically will not take it. You won't see that there's any sugar really gone for probably that time in December and January, but starting around February, that's when I typically see that they start taking the sugar a lot. Your stronger colonies will take more. I even find my nukes normally will take more than some of my 10 frame hives. My nukes are typically 2 deeps, 2 mediums, or 3 deeps and 1 medium. They're typically about 4 boxes high. So they're a strong, pretty strong colony, but they'll go through more than some of my 10 frame hives that are a deep and a medium. And the monitor your colony, the bees will normally grow fast during the winter with the candy boards and feeding the pollen. And in the spring, they're going to either want to swarm, and if you don't take care of getting them ready for the honey flow. So 6 M's again is your mites, your mother, I know you got it. Munchies. Well, that's number 4. So I've got it right here. Minimize, yeah, minimize. Try and do it in order. So minimize. So y'all are listening. And then munchies, moisture, and monitoring. So here's a picture of one of my beehives. I've got a deep, a medium, and I do my candy boards all the same color. They're blue. They're always blue. My quilt boxes are always yellow. That way I know when I have it in storage where they're at, how many they have, if I've got it on the bees, what they are. I know that a yellow box is never going to be a super. It's always a quilt box for me. My bottoms, I used to use screen bottoms when I first got into beekeeping, because that's what we're always told to use for mites. But I've transitioned almost all mine to solid bottoms. The only time a screen bottom ever makes it onto one of my beehives is if I don't have a solid bottom available. And all my nukes are solids. And the only ones that would be screened would be my 10 frame. And going into the winter, I mark every one of my ones that have a screen bottom on the back with a piece of red duct tape, a little piece, so that when I go and do moxilic acid in December, I know exactly how many I've got to put a bottom into to block it off when I do moxilic acid vaporizing. Makes it a lot faster for me than having to look at every one, because I do have some solid bottoms that a lot of them are solid in the back, so you know that you're not going to be able to put a like a one of the little boards under. And then I have some where they didn't put the bottom, and I have to get underneath it and look to see if it was a solid bottom. So So this is looking down. This is the monitoring part in the wintertime, routine inspections. Lifting up that burlap so that you can look down into the bees through the screen. You can see how much sugar that they have available. You can see right here that they're building some comb in there. Typically, they'll fill that up with some drones. So you have some early drones. I typically cut it out because I'm going to be refilling it with some more sugar. But if you didn't cut it out, then eventually they're going to fill it back with honey. So, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I already talked about screen inner covers. The ones that are the nukes, they're basically the same as my 10 frame ones. I'll take I use a solid lid here with a feeder. My feeders are all green unless I have some Man Lake feeders that have the plastic inserts and they're all white because they were pre-painted. But all my other feeders are green so I can know what they are. I'll take that off. And then I'll put my candy board when it's full. Put that on top of them. And then my quilt box, the screen inner cover, and that lid. So it's real quick to do. When I do my 10 frame one, it's the same way. One thing that you'll find, you make your own candy boards, you can get the wire pretty tight on there, but on the 10 frame ones, they can sag some. So this one here is tight, but my first year making them, they sagged a little bit, and I think it's right here. I made some little pieces of wood to go on top of my frames to try to hold that wire up so it didn't mash down onto the bees. Typically, if I did it, I would only need about 3 to 4. That's why I brought 4. Is all you needed right around the middle, and that would leave it off of it. If you watch, it's called Weller Bee Supply. Sounds like you've watched that one. WELLER Bee Supply on their quilt boxes. I think they're in Ohio. He talks about the process of making the candy boards and the quilt boxes. But they use a entrance in the front, because I guess they need it in Ohio. I drilled it my first year, and then I think I plugged it within a month or so. Never used it anymore. But if you do decide to put a top entrance in there, make sure that you kind of drill up into it, because you don't want rainwater going down into your beehive from it. So same with your quilt boxes. Some people will, instead of using a medium box like this one here, they might use a deep, or they may decide to use a medium and just not fill it as full, but they'll put their ventilation in holes in here and then put screen wire. So just make sure that you put your holes the right way. But with the 10 frame ones, they do the same process with this, but on all my 10 frame ones, I use these Be Smart lids. And you can see that in David Bailey's video as well. I did it that way because my first year making my quilt boxes, I want to make sure that they were big enough, so I made them a little bit too wide. Then my lids didn't want to fit. So these here are little bit wider. They angle out. They have notches in there to help with ventilation. And when you take that off of a strong hive, it actually collects water in here. And I'll take it and, you can shake that water out of that lid. On the video that they made, they actually had ice inside their lid, under 30 degrees in that one. And then when I take this off in the spring to do my honey, I take the quilt box and the candy board off. I actually will leave the screen inner cover and my Be Smart plastic lid, and I know that those are the ones I'm making honey on. So might as well leave it on there. Okay, so the wood lids, we talked about the space on the sides. 8-frame, I have had once in a while 8-frame hive. I don't have any more. But if I was doing an 8-frame hive, I normally used a 10-frame lid on there. They say they make a conversion kit for this one to fit, but I just used a 10-frame telescoping lid. So we'll go back. Well, maybe. So we'll talk about the candy boards and quilt boxes, or about the feeders. So different ways to do your food. You can do candy boards. You can do fondant. They have the mountain method that you can do with the like the wax paper and the sugar on it. You also have one that's in the Bee Buzz this month, where Mark talked about just taking a 10-frame or 10-pound and 4-pound bags of sugar and dampen them, let them dry to where they're hard, and you put a medium box on it and put your put that on in there, and they'll eat it out. But I have enough trouble with. I thought I had a picture, but I didn't see it. Sure it's in there. Yeah, it's in there. Can I get to it? Yeah. So you can see how much they build in there. That will get onto it'll stick to the bottom of your quilt box, and that's one of the reasons why you need to take your burlap out of your chips so that you can get in there and break all that apart to get it unattached so that you can get it out. And if they had as strong as hives as I did with that big with a medium box, you're gonna have a lot of mess to have to clean up. So, but the shims, I made these my first year, but I got bees needs to do these. I don't know some of the other bee supplies. You make them as well at your place? But this is a 2-inch shim. He used to make a smaller one, but I got him to do 2s. That's what I like to use here. And I'll scribe a 3/8 inch line all the way around, and I use 1/2-inch hardware cloth on the for this, which is this is 1/2 inch. That's so the bees can go in and out of it easier. And then the quilt boxes are number 8 hardware cloth. And you can get both of those at your local hardware store. But for they're typically 3 foot wide. You can, the wire is, you can, for about 2 foot of wire, you can do 2 8s or 2 10-frame candy boards, or with the number 8, same thing with the boxes here. If you decide that you don't want to make your own, you can always buy them from one of the bee supply companies. I think Midnight Bee Supply, they sell the candy boards, or they had in the past, that are a little bit thicker than this, and it's got an extra support down the middle, and they actually pre-mix your first batch of sugar in it, so you don't even have to do all that extra work. But in terms of the items, there's my pollen feeder. Told you I was going to mention the pollen feeder I use. That's one of the ones from Man Lake. I only put those in my yards where I have enough bees. And I've got one yard where it's closer to some other people, so I don't feed them either, because I don't want to feed the other people's bees. So we'll get to the candy board. So one thing to do with your candy board that you'll see on the Weller Bee Supply is to make sure that you're not doing this on top of a table, especially your nice wooden table. So what I normally do is or always do is I'll have a 10-frame box, maybe 1 or 2 boxes high, so I don't have to bend over too much. And I'll put that there. These are political signs, so you should be able to get plenty of those in the next couple months. And I pre-cut those to fit in there, and it takes me 2 of them for each one. And I'll put that in like this, and I'll set it on top of that box at an angle, so it's crossed. So it'll be sitting like this, so that the sides here are pushing the political boards up into it. When I do my next one, it will sit like this, and I'll just keep going back and forth. And I have enough to where I can do about 6 boxes, or 6 10-frame ones at a time, and about 8 or 9 nukes. By then I'm tired. So, but I can. When I first started doing candy boards, I did it by hand. So the items you're going to need to do a candy board, you may not need a scale, because you can probably buy your sugar in the 4s or 10s and guess at it. But I go through probably about 2,000 pounds of sugar doing my candy boards. So I weigh everything out. I've got a little Tupperware container there that I poured in. Got distilled white vinegar, little measuring spoons, and a measuring cup. So for a 10-frame candy board, it's 16 pounds of sugar. I do 3 cups of water, 1 tablespoon of distilled white vinegar. So 1 tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. Mixing container, and then a large spoon. So I bought this one back in 2017. It still looks the same as it did 2017. 4 blocks. So I got little 2x4s, and a board to put underneath the hardware cloth, which is actually the political signs. So I used to, when I first got into it, I would mix this, put the sugar in here, 8 pounds of sugar, and I would take this and do a 12 ounces, 1.5 cups of water, 1.5 tablespoon or teaspoons of distilled white vinegar, stirred up, poured on there. And then I would stir and stir and stir. And time you get done doing about, I think I had 22 back then. My arms were sore doing that many. Years later, I think I was talking to Dennis Brown. I don't know if y'all know Dennis Brown or not, down in Lee County. But we were talking, and that's when I got to the easy part, which is a bucket and a drill and a paint stirrer or stirrer on it. So I'll still measure out my 8 pounds of sugar. I'll pour it into the bucket, and then I'll mix this and pour it in. And within, I'd say, a minute, I've got it stirred up like I want it. And what I do with the blocks is I put 2 on the back corners and 1 in the middle. And that 1 in the middle at first, that's where that Weller Bee Supply put their opening for the bees to go in and out. But it's still good to see that those holes when you pack it in there. I'll mix it up. I'll pour that sugar out of the bucket into here. I'll pack it down. Now do another bucket of 8 pounds. Pack it in here. I use the 4th block to pat everything down to where it's flat, because I want it as tight as possible. And then I'll take the blocks out, and then I'll mash those corners down to where it's solid, wasn't falling around. And then I'd throw that next candy board on top of there with the political signs in there, and I'd start the process again. I would let this sit for a day, and then I go and I had another place where I'd take the candy boards. What I found worked for me, you have those holes. That's for that air to go up through. Whatever doesn't absorb into your sugar will go on out the quilt box. But what I found is I'd take a pencil or a pen into one of those openings to be able to separate this from here. And then I take this part to another spot and I set it just like I did here. It'd be a lid, 10-frame lid. Set it there, set the next one on top, and just crisscrossing. And I'd let it sit for about 2 to 3 more days for it to dry, and then I could put it on the bees at that time. I like for it to sit for about 3 days for a minimum. You will have some sugar that gets on here. You can either pour it back in and mix it up again for another candy board, or you can throw it away. It's not going to be excessive how much sugar you have left over. When I do my nukes, I do the 8 pounds, which is nuke one's down there somewhere. Oh, there it is. If it was a snake, it would have bit me. But 8 pound ones, I do the same thing. The block in the middle, 2 blocks on the outside, and pack it in. If you have an 8 frame, it's probably about 13 pounds of sugar. If you don't want to do candy borders like that, but you still want to have this kind of setup, because I like to have the sugar off the top of the beehives, and when you get done at the end of the year, you can take it off. Some people will do candy blocks. So when I get through my initial candy boards and I need to refill around February and March and all, then I will make candy blocks now. And some of your vendors will make these for you. They'll make them, they're about 3 pounds. One of the vendors I know, they heat theirs and cook it on a stove and then pour it in. and they'll do just a sugar looking one, or they'll add some pollen to it. That's the other thing, is you can put a hole in your candy board up there and pour some pollen powder if you want to. I've never done that because I feed them externally, but you can make one of these, like this 3-pound one, for probably $2.50, $3. But if you bought one in the store, you're about $10 to $13. So it's a lot easier for you to make your own. I mix it up in the with the mixer like before, but the only difference is I use less water. And if you watch one of Cayman Reynolds' videos, anybody ever seen Cayman Reynolds? He did a video, and now he used some apple cider vinegar, and I don't know why he used apple cider vinegar, but he used way too much. And then I think his wife made him have to clean their whole stove because it boiled out all over into the stove. So I use about half the amount of water when I'm doing a candy blocks than I do for candy boards. So if I was doing 8 pounds of sugar blending in where I used 1.5 cups, I might use 3/4 of a cup or something like that. And I can fit about 6 of these on one top of the inside the stove. These are real good for refilling in here. You know, you can fit some of those real easy. This size, you know, it's basically a 2 of them would fill up a whole one. And sometimes when you're refilling your beehives, all you need is about half of one. So it works out great. And then the big one, you know, would be something like that. But it's what I found happens is I can use a little hatchet on that candy block and break it real easy with what I want to put back into the bees. But it's real easy to make those candy blocks. I do it at 180 degrees for about an hour and a half, maybe. You can watch one of the videos, and like Cayman did, he'll tell you the time frame, but I think that's what it was. And that would allow you, once I take it out of the stove, I flip it out into a lid to be able to store it. And that's how, like 10-frame lids, I use them all the time. So that's how I take them out to the bee yard. Just trying to get through. By running out of time. So pros of implementing your 6 M's to overwintering success. You have a great chance of keeping your bees alive for the winter or through the winter. Increase your numbers of bees in the spring because they'll be so strong, or you can make more honey. You don't have to buy bees every year like I did at the very beginning. You do have to buy more boxes. So the vendors still make money off of you by you buying equipment. There is the initial cost of the shim here, the wire, your candy board quilt box, but all this can be reused. You can tell how old this is because it says fill this up with sugar and $6. Now I think to fill one of these up is around $13. So, you know, sugar prices have really gone up. That's one reason why I guess I haven't fed as much this year. Because they think I'm a moonshiner when I go to Walmart. I'll buy about 600 pounds. At a time, I think my dad and I went one time, we got right at 1,200 pounds of sugar. But you can reuse that. My quilt boxes, I actually will stack them on top of each other. And I don't replace my wood chips every year either. The only time my wood chips get replaced is if I had an issue with, say, ants getting into the wood chips, or some other insect gets into it. And like I said earlier, the bees will eat through the bottom of your burlap and put holes. I may throw that piece of burlap away and wood chips and redo it again. But most of that stuff is reusable every year. Just have to basically just do your sugar. But learn what works for you. It may not be the candy board. It may be the fondant or the candy blocks or things like that. But just find out what works for you and keep repeating it and educate your friends. The cons to the 6Ms is if you decide that you want to do it yourself, it takes a little bit of time and energy to build all your stuff like this. If you look in here, there's a lot of staples, a lot of bending the wire, cutting. I have an automated or a battery powered hooks onto a 20-volt drill, be able to cut my wire easy, or else it'd be a lot more trouble. I use 1/2-inch staples in my candy board and 3/8 inch in my quilt boxes, but it takes a lot of time building that, mixing the sugar together, installing them on the bees. If you monitor them and provide what they need to survive, they will be strong. Typically, if you went in with a good quality queen, no disease, and good feed, they're going to be strong coming out of the winter. My issue with my bees is I resist putting on my honey supers too early. So I may lose part of the honey flow because I want to make sure my bees are still alive. I like having that insurance on them. Now, I will tell you that a couple years ago, I did it one way. This last year, or I think I did it another way, but one year I put a honey super on top of here, and you know what they did? They built the comb underneath the frames. Another year I put the honey super on top, and then I put this on there, but I didn't use on top of it, so they could still get to it. But I didn't use a queen excluder, so then your queen goes up and lays all in your honey super. So, but I resist taking it off and putting it on through probably mid-April is when I start taking my candy boards and quilt boxes off. As bees eat out the sugar, they do make a mess. They'll build a lot of comb, but some people like to have that comb for doing other projects like candles and you can use that wax for other purposes as well. But it is a lot of cleanup. The queens will lay drones in those frames. And then there's storage and cleanup. So I have a certain building that I put all my quilt boxes and candy boards in, stack them up, screen inner covers, just so that they're not in the way for next year. And when I get ready to do it, they'll be there for next year. So other options was buying your supplies already from the bee supply company already made. Use a different candy instead of the quilt box or candy boards. You use the fondants and stuff, candy bricks. We already talked about drilling your holes in the quilt boxes so that you don't have to use a screen inner cover, which is another $10 or $11. Or maybe that was a price 10 years ago. Now I will tell you what I do. Because I've got enough boxes now. But I typically, when I go to my to the spring meeting or summer meeting, I try to be one of the first people there with the vendors where they have the unassembled boxes for $8 to $10 a piece. And those boxes, like the mediums and the shallows, those are the ones I buy to do my quilt boxes with. Because you can buy them very inexpensive and put together yourself. So 6Ms, like we talked about before, I got all these right here, so I don't have to worry about number 3. So mites, the mother, minimize, munchies, moisture, and monitoring. Like I said, moisture and is for me was the number one thing that turned my success around. So if you want your bees to survive, determine what you need to do to address those 6Ms. If you leave out just one of them, there's a chance that your bees are not going to be as good of a success in surviving the winter. The cost of your supplies is less than a package of bees. You can keep using it year after year. Your strong colony will pay for itself with those increases or honey. And like I said, moisture is very important. And don't think that just that one candy board is going to be enough for the winter. I had one 10-frame hive that was so strong, they went through 3 of these during one winter. So they went through 48 pounds of sugar by themselves. And they had a deep and 2 mediums full of honey going into the winter as well. And they still went through 48 pounds of sugar. My nukes will typically go through about 3 of these. So you need to be prepared is what it says. So I'm glad that Jennifer got with me to come for the September meeting, because now hopefully you will be prepared for the winter. You've got time, if you decide that you want to do this, you got time to go ahead and start either building your products or buying your products. You're not waiting till the end to get ready for it. And the main thing is to make sure that you share your success with your clubs, your friends, and let them know what you did to lower your percentage of losses. And hopefully, with that, North Carolina will minimize our losses, because as you probably see on our thing is Be Informed does the surveys, 40 to 50, 60% losses. And when I look at that, most of those losses, the people probably doing the surveys are actually beekeepers that want to take the time to actually fill them out. So there's a lot of beekeepers out there that don't come to club meetings, don't even know what a mite is, or that they need to feed their bees, and their losses are probably even more than what we have. So it's probably even a lot higher. So any questions? I know I probably talked for too long, but any questions? Go ahead.
Ask Pat. You're staggering those candy boards. How are you even doing that?
That's just when I'm storing them. So I'll put a 10-frame lid down. Well, when I'm making them, I'm staggering them and they'll have this underneath it, so they're drying out around the top area. And then when I take them off and take these out, then they can I will put them on a lid, and I stagger them 9 degrees, and they get air from the top, the bottoms, and can dry out. And like I said, I try to do it for about 3 days to try and get it dry. And they get so hard, they're almost like a rock. One lady I talked to, she decided that she wanted to empty hers out. So she put hers in the bathtub and ran the shower on it to empty it out. What I do with mine at the end of the season is I will actually take these and do the same thing. I'll take a lid and stack them up, 9 degrees, and I have them under buildings. I got about 3 different places where I put them. And then the springtime and summer, my bees are taking all the sugar. So mine are actually empty right now. Where I had them full coming out of the winter, they're actually empty now, so they're ready. Yeah, I put a strap around it, and I had one beehive where I used like the 8-inch cinder block. I put that on one yard. It was one at a high school where I used to keep a beehive for them, and I couldn't put a strap around it, so I just put a cinder block. So a cinder block would work as well. But these, when I first started getting them, they were about $24 a piece. If I ordered them from Man Lake at that time, it was, well, yeah. When it was $24, it was from Midnight Bee Supply. Then when I went to, if I needed them quick and couldn't make the travel, I'd order them from Man Lake, so it was in the low 30s. Now it's, I think, 40 something for one of these. And, but at the summer meeting, Midnight Bee Supply had them again for $24 to $26 or something. I got another 20 of them from him. So they had a sale on them at the summer meetings. So that's a good reason to go to some of your spring and summer meetings, is you can find some deals out there, certain products that you like to use. Any other questions? I used to order it from Amazon, but my last couple rolls I got from Southern States. And it's strange because sometimes it's 150 foot maybe. And I got some on for about $60 to $70. And all of a sudden I'd see it jump up to eBay or there jump up to about 120, 130. But the last ones I bought from Southern States last year, and it was around $60. So I told they had a few more, and I told some people in my club about it, and they ran over there and got them for them. So that was one in Asheboro. So, but I'm sure there's some other Southern states around here that would have those. But what I do, I didn't say it before, be able to help you out with it, is since I double mine up, what I do is I measure the width here. My 3-foot section goes this way. That way it always works. But my width is the width here plus the sides going down, plus I want to have about 4 inches on each one to fold over. And then I double that length. So I double it over. And for a 10 frame hive, it's somewhere around 36 to 38 inches wide. So I end up using double that, which would be, around 6 feet or so, 7 feet, which is what this one here is. It's just about 6 feet or so. And like I said, I'll fold it over, and that 3-foot section, which is that, would be part that went front to back. And then this here would go into the, along each side.
Or is the burlap really important for the ventilation piece?
You could probably use anything. I just always heard burlap, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've always used this. I bought some one time at Walmart. I never used it, which was a real thick or real tightly woven burlap. I never used it. I just buy this and double it up. You had one. But I just go and get it. Now, my local Walmart sometimes used to not keep enough on the shelf. So I actually spoke to the manager, and he started keeping a lot for me then. So when I go in there, I'll buy, I was going through 800 pounds of sugar a week doing last year feeding my bees. So that's why I don't feed as much hadn't fed as much this year in the spring and summer because I was going through so much sugar. So, but for making my candy boards, I'll go through and figure out how many how many 10 frame ones I have, how many 8 frames, and I'll know exactly how many bags of sugar I need based on the 16 pounds and 8 pounds. I think I have about 1,200 pounds of sugar in my kitchen right now. And along with my sugar water, when I mix my sugar water up, I used to do it by hand. So I used to pour I'd measure it out and with my scale and milk jugs or tea jugs, and I'd put it in there and I'd mix it, and I got good exercise shaking. But once you get about more than about 20 to 30 hives, it gets harder to do. So, and I do it at the bathtub so that when I got done, I could shower because the sugar, when you put that lid on there, sometimes a little bit of sugar will shake out. So when I used to do it at my parents' kitchen sink, my mom would get on to me every once in a while. So we'll do it at the bathtub, and I could shower down. But now I have a 55-gallon barrel and a trolling boat motor with a marine battery, and it takes me 12 minutes to load in about 6 5-gallon buckets of water and 225 pounds of sugar. And I'll have it spinning. So in 12 minutes, I can have it loaded, and I let it stir for about an hour, and then I turn it off, and it doesn't take me but a few minutes I buy these 5-gallon jugs from Smithfield Chicken Barbecue for $1, and I rinse them all out, and I'll put about 3.5 gallons of sugar water in each one, and then I use a tea pitcher to pour that water into and then pour it into my beehives. It makes it a whole lot easier than dealing with the jugs, and I had too many of the 1-gallon jugs to turn over and start leaking. I've never had any trouble with those dollar ones from Smithfield Chicken Barbecue. So, but I also got told I probably never get a wife either with having that 55-gallon barrel of doing sugar in my kitchen. So I think someone at Montgomery County told me that. No, it wasn't you, it was some other woman. So, any other questions? Oh, you go ahead.
What was your trick for tightening that up when you installed it?
I think it was just experience, just doing it more. What I do is I cut, I'll have it to where I have about I think it's about 17.5 inches or so across. I cut out a notch at three of those squares in and 3 to the side. So I got a notch on each one. I fold it over and I tighten it down and do it. But this one here, I mean, it's tight. But the first ones I did my first year, I must have done maybe a 1/2 inch longer. Is probably what it was. That 1/2 inch probably was the difference. But I don't have any trouble with it now. I end up, when I fold this over, I'll use another block, wood, and I use that to push it down, to flatten it down. I'll use the 2x4 block to guide it down there. A lot less stressful on your hands too. I'll do the same thing when I do my hardware cloth on the quilt boxes as well. But on that, you can bend it. The number 8 hardware cloth, you can bend a lot easier and straighten it out. I do find that the 1/2 inch cloth is straight, so I have no trouble with it being at the right angles that I need. But the number 8 hardware cloth that you use in the in these quilt boxes, my first year doing it, they were straight, but now every year it is, if I did it based on the wire going across with that little bit here, it's way off. It's at an angle. So it stretches. So what I end up doing on these is I have a big like T-square that I will mark with a Sharpie. So I get my 90-degree angles, and then I cut it with my drill cutter, because if you don't and you just use the wire as the path, you'll be way off. I mean, it was 3 inches off in that 18, 20 inches. So I think it's supposed to help keep it from spoiling or mildewing, something like that. So, yes.
The dagger starts on the merging of the secrets. Splitting the secrets and the secrets.
But but like I said, the process I do, I never have to heat anything when I'm doing my mixing and putting it in my candy boards. The only time I would heat anything would be if I was putting it in the oven. So I know the kind like one of the vendors did when they were mixing theirs on the stovetop. That seemed pretty dangerous to me. I know I was there one time when they were doing it, and the person that was stirring it needed to go get something for one of the other customers, and he asked me to get there and stir it because he couldn't stop from stirring it while he was doing it. So, any other questions? Well, thank you very much for having me today.